As children, being a movie star is a popular career path many of us find ourselves aspiring to at some point. However, from perfect red carpet appearances to driving expensive sport cars, the glitz and glam of the lifestyle always seemed too good to be true. For some, the illusion lasts forever, but for others, disillusionment creeps in far too quickly. This is the case of the Riverdale actor who turned a gruesome fantasy into reality. This is the case of Ryan Grantham. My name is Zach, and you are watching Crime Origin. Ryan Grantham, a young 24-year-old Canadian actor, was born in 1998 in the beautiful town of Squamish, British Columbia. He lived there with his mother, Barbara Waite, and his father, who left the family shortly after his younger sister Lisa was born. As a child actor, achieving his acting debut at just 9 years old in the 2007 film The Secret of the Nutcracker, Ryan's childhood was always kept private from the public eye. However, needless to say, his mother was his biggest supporter, and the two were very close. Between himself, his mother, and his sister, life was as close to ordinary as it could get for a family with a child actor in its midst. Not long after his first acting role, Ryan's career quickly turned positive, and he was featured in other highly successful films, including Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Becoming Redwood, and The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Not to mention his guest appearances in popular series such as Supernatural, iZombie, and of course, Riverdale. His appearance in Riverdale came at a big plot twist in Season 4, where his character confesses to killing the main character, Archie's father, in a hit and run. With the conflicting reviews and reputation of the American teen drama, Ryan Grantham's fate only brought about more speculation, including countless jokes and conspiracies from trolls and fans alike. Once his involvement in the 2019 Riverdale season was over, he went on to act in the crime drama film Undercover Cheerleader, which received mixed reviews and a below-average rating. Even though the film was not a big success, it was not the film Ryan expected to be his last. As the year came to an end and the announcement of the COVID-19 pandemic spread across the world, Ryan, like most other actors in Canada, found himself at home dealing with the many emotions and thought processes that go through one's mind during this type of international crisis. The entire film industry in Canada stopped all productions in early March 2020 during a nationwide shutdown, and there was no clear end in sight anytime soon. At this point, Ryan had already been struggling with depression for a couple of months, and it wasn't long before his mental health took a serious turn for the worst. On the 31st of March 2020, just a few weeks after the Canadian shutdown, Ryan did something that would ruin his life and his acting career forever. In the time leading up to the event that would change Ryan's life forever, he found himself experiencing a clinical depression that deepened every day, causing him to fantasize about violent acts and committing suicide. He was smoking marijuana often and struggling to maintain his performance at school. However, he managed to hold off his urges, at least for a while. As the month of March drew to an end, Ryan's behavior became more and more indicative of some seriously bad intentions. He began filming himself with his GoPro camera, and he carried out unusual rehearsals of something pernicious. Ryan had another skill alongside his acting that contributed to the demise that followed: shooting a gun. He would load his .22 caliber rifle, creep up behind his mother, and point it at her head. Then, without a word, he would let go of the trigger and walk away. He did this over and over again for days without pulling the trigger. He kept track of his behavior in a journal and kept copies of his rehearsal footage as well. On the 31st of March, his mother, Barbara Waite, was sitting in the living room of their Squamish home playing the piano, something that she loved to do often. Ryan loaded his rifle, as he had done so many times before, but this time he did something very strange. He sat in his room, loading and unloading the gun multiple times while he mindlessly listened to the click of the bullets going into the magazine as they echoed across the room. Once he was satisfied and had loaded the gun for the final time, he walked down the stairs and sat at the bottom of the steps with the rifle in his hand, and he listened to his mother play. After about 15 minutes, he entered the room and crept up behind his mother as he had done before. But this time, he did not hesitate. This time, he pulled the trigger and shot his mother in the back of the head as her beautiful piano playing came to a gruesome halt. She fell to the floor and began bleeding out as Ryan picked up his camera to film his confession to the murder. He spoke into his GoPro camera for 4 minutes and showed his mother's body lying on the living room floor, murdered in cold blood. But the details of his sudden violent outbreak don't end there. After this despicable betrayal of his mother's trust and love, he returned to his room and prepared for his grand finale of violence. Before bed, he covered his mom's body in a white sheet and went back upstairs to watch Netflix. The following morning, on April 1st, 2020, Ryan got up and came downstairs to see his mother's body still lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. He hung a religious rosary from the piano and arranged candles around her. He carefully lit each one and went on to set his master plan into motion. Heading to his car, he packed the trunk with 12 Molotov cocktails, 3 guns, ammunition, camping supplies, and a printed Google Maps page with directions to Riverdale Cottage in Ottawa, the home of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It was clear that Ryan had prepared to do something that would make headlines across the world. Ryan expressed his intentions to kill Trudeau in his journal before hitting the road on his long, murderous trip to Ottawa. However, once he reached the British Columbian town of Hope, he had a sudden change of heart and decided his violent tendencies had better use elsewhere. Perhaps the change of scenery invoked a rage for matters closer to Ryan's heart. He turned his car around and made his way back towards Vancouver while he decided which area was better worth his act of mass violence. The 2 main choices he juggled with were his school, the Simon Fraser University, or the Lionsgate Bridge, both popular areas guaranteed to create a memorable transgression. However, upon arriving in Vancouver, no one could have predicted what he decided to do instead. On the 1st of April, the day after Ryan Grantham killed his mother and set off to commit his planned act of mass violence, his sister, Lisa, began calling Barbara Waite's phone. She tried to get a hold of her mother for hours through calls and texts, and upon no reply, she decided to drive to her mother's house to make sure everything was okay. While she headed to the family home in Squamish, she had no idea what her older brother had done, nor what he was planning to do next. With Lisa in her car on her way to the house and Ryan in his heading back to Vancouver, everything came to a synchronized conclusion of events. As Lisa got out of her car and headed towards the front door, Ryan arrived in Vancouver with a troubled mind and scattered thoughts. She opened the door and walked inside the home. Ryan pulled his car up to a sidewalk near the Vancouver police station and got out of the vehicle. To Lisa's horror, she discovered her mother's body lying covered in the blood-soaked sheet next to the piano with all the candles melting onto the floor. Ryan, on the other hand, saw a police officer sitting in his car with the window rolled down. As Lisa cried out and stumbled for the phone to call the police, she listened to the dial tone while Ryan began walking toward the officer's vehicle. Then, instead of all the violent plans running through Ryan Grantham's mind, he stood next to the police officer's window and he said, "I killed my mother." Lisa got through to the local police and authorities were dispatched to the home immediately. Meanwhile, at the Vancouver police station, Ryan was brought in for questioning about his confession. Once brought in for matricide, Ryan divulged the whole truth about the murder and his planned violent escapades. He shared his confession verbally, then handed over the journal and tapes he had been keeping, filled with evidence against him, including the video of his recorded confession and the footage showing his deceased mother. Upon searching his car, police discovered his weapon stash, maps, and equipment, making it clear that the assassination plans Ryan shared were no joke. While awaiting trial on account of first-degree murder, Ryan spent the next 2 years under close scrutiny by psychologists and investigators alike. He used the time to try to recover from his erratic state of depression and focused on bettering himself after his heinous crime. On June 13, 2022, Ryan Grantham finally stood trial at the British Columbia court and began his official sentencing for the murder of his mother and further intentions of violence. His 4-minute home footage of the murder and confession were brought forth in court, as well as a few of his private journal excerpts that were both incriminating and enlightening about the true state of mind that Ryan was in during the murder. In one journal entry from the day of the murder, dated 31st of March 2020, Ryan wrote, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry, Lisa. I hate myself." He then continued by saying, "There's a lot of media of me out there, film and TV, hundreds of hours of me that can be viewed and dissected. No one will understand." The plans that Ryan had to kill Trudeau were also accepted as true in court, as all his confession statements to police and the excerpts from the journal confirmed what his intentions were at the time of the incident, although he did not follow through with them. With help from psychologist Chris Johnson, the lawyer working with Ryan since the matricide concluded that he had not premeditated the murder and instead killed his mother as a result of his mental illness. He stated in court, "At the time of the offense, this killing was not done out of hatred or animosity. It was done in Mr. Grantham's disordered thinking to prevent his mother from seeing what he thought he was about to do." On this account, Ryan pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, as he allegedly had not premeditated the murder. Although one would think that the conscious rehearsals of the murder and the amount of time it took Ryan to pull the trigger would warrant quite a bit of pre-thought. However, in the eyes of the court, Ryan's pleading won the judge over. In Canada, second-degree murder warrants an automatic life sentence, which will likely involve 25 years or further incarceration. The only question left to debate is what Ryan's parole eligibility will be. His sentence has not been a surprise to him, as he has spent the last 25 months of his pretrial incarceration going for counseling, which has helped him tremendously. He completed his statement with a heartfelt apology, saying, "In the face of something so horrible, saying sorry seems so pointless. But from every fiber of my being, I am sorry." He then went on to speak with some enthusiasm, stating, "Someday, if I am ever released from prison, I hope to continue on this path of bettering myself." However, despite his heartfelt apology, his sister, Lisa, has been completely devastated by the murder, stating, "How can I trust anybody when my only sibling chose to execute my mom when her back was turned?" It makes you wonder, is the life of a child actor too much for such a young mind to bear? And just how happy was Ryan's life after all? Because for someone with their whole life and career ahead of them to end up enforcing such a horrendous fate on someone they love, somewhere along the way, there must have been just too much pressure for Ryan Grantham to handle. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like the video, comment your take down below, and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit that notification bell in order to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case.